Strange but true stories. Tales from the light side, the dark side, and the other side. I'm Steve White. At the end of each episode, we solicit your strange supernatural stories so we can share the mysteries of this world with others. Lots of times, an experience we share resonates with others in the audience, and they submit their own stories. We are truly appreciative of all the stories shared with us. There have been some familiar people that have shown up in more than one story. This story today was submitted to us by a viewer like you, and it features a familiar name who came in to assist a family connect with a lost loved one. At the request of the person who sent us this story, the names of the people in the story have been changed. Information, including news stories of the incident involved, were sent to us so we could check the validity of the timeline and the basics of the story we are calling A Voice from the Other Side. To make sure I cover this story right, I guess I have to go back a ways. 4 years ago, in May 2015, my cousin disappeared, believed by some to be dead because the last person to see her was her ex-boyfriend, Frank. Burley, Idaho is a small town of about 10,000 people in the southern part of the state that sits on the banks of the Snake River. We're about 160 miles southeast of Boise. Rumors went wild back then about some sort of fight between my cousin, who for this story I am calling Caitlin, and Frank, after Frank found out Caitlin was newly engaged to this other guy that I'll call Wayne. I didn't know much about Wayne, except nearly everyone felt a little scared when he was around. I know it might sound like some love triangle gone wrong right off the bat, but the story is complicated, as I guess all love triangles are. Frank and Caitlin had a baby together, but the little girl was born premature and had a lot of medical issues. The doctors did what they could for the baby, but she ended up dying after only 4 months. The death of the baby girl put a lot of strain on the relationship, and Frank and Caitlin broke up. They remained good friends after the breakup, though. Wayne didn't really like that my cousin stayed so close to her ex-boyfriend. On May 16th, 2015, Caitlin went missing, and Frank, the ex-boyfriend, was the one to report her disappearance. The police started looking for her, scoping the area, asking family members and friends multitudes of questions over a long period of time, but nothing ever seemed to come of it. It seemed like she had simply vanished. A private investigator was called in, and he was able to find some stuff belonging to Caitlin hidden away in some bushes near the river, just a few miles outside of town. But still, Caitlin was not found. We went from hoping that she would be found alive to fearing the worst. Nothing else came from the case, and after a few months of an exhaustive investigation, it went cold. Wayne, the fiancé with a grudge against Frank, ended up going to prison for drugs. Frank, the ex-boyfriend, really suffered mentally after the vanishing of Caitlin and eventually admitted himself into a mental institution overcome with grief and depression. Caitlin's immediate family held vigils for months, praying for answers and hoping for any information that would lead us to her. I tried my best to help keep hope going, but as months turned into years with no new information coming forward, everyone just started to drift. It became hard for us to even so much as look at anything that reminded us of Caitlin. Some of us even thought that we could see her trying to get our attention, but we just brushed it off as just missing her. It wasn't until 2017, more than 2 years after Caitlin's disappearance, when a new person came into all our lives, and new information was shed on the case. In early November 2017, news broke about a construction crew in the next county finding skeletal remains at a construction site, hidden in a ditch. I didn't think much of it at first, until a couple of days later. When the weather's nice, I like to head out to the river to either hike or fish, or simply nothing at all to just kind of decompress. This particular day seemed just like normal at first, until I happened to pass by the spot where Caitlin's belongings were found, and I ran into this strange man taking photos of the river. He was a big dude, about 6'7". He wore a long black trench coat and a black cowboy hat that covered his shaven head. His face showed he was looking for something in the water. Initially, I thought it was just a strangely dressed guy taking nature pictures, but I got this feeling that he had answers to questions I had. Look, I know it sounds crazy, but that feeling was so strong that I had to approach him and start up a conversation. "Hey," I shouted to him. "Catching anything good?" He looked at me like I was somebody texting on their phone in a movie theater. I stepped a little closer to him as he took another photo of the river, finally getting an answer from him once I stood next to him. "Not really," he said. "Well, what are you looking for?" I asked him. "You don't really look like you're from around here." "I'm not. I can't go into too many details, but I'm currently in the middle of an investigation, and I was told to look around here to retrace a few things others left off." "So, what are you, like a PI or something?" "Yeah, something like that." He looked me directly in the eye, as if he was trying to scan my mind for information. I started to feel nervous, but tried to keep my cool. "Is there something you might be able to tell me?" I didn't want to say anything about Caitlin, but it was like I was psychically compelled to spill it. So I told him. "Well, you see, a friend of mine, my cousin, disappeared, and this was where they found some of her stuff." He nodded his head and turned off his camera. "I see. Did she happen to have blonde hair, bluish green eyes, about 5 foot 4 inches, bit of a smoker?" he asked me. He must have taken the look in my eyes as a sign of confirmation. "One last question," he said. "Did she happen to have a tattoo of the name Ruby on her right arm?" Ruby was the name of Caitlin's baby girl that had died at just 4 months. I stumbled to find words as I tried to explain the situation more to this large man. Our conversation covered a whole bunch of things, what I and others thought happened the night she disappeared, things of that nature. When it all finally came to an end, he took a moment to process the information before getting ready to leave. As he walked past me, he stopped just next to me facing the opposite direction I was and whispered, "If you care about her immediate family like you say you do, take my advice and stick around for them. I can't reveal much, but I'm going to tell you that there has been a new development in the case. You all are about to get some closure. Give it about 3 weeks." I froze when he said this. I remembered something Caitlin's mother, my aunt, had told me the day before. Our grandma passed away after Caitlin went missing, and her final words were that she promised to help bring Caitlin home. I was never one to believe in the supernatural, but even I had to admit that this was getting weird. I wanted to ask more questions, but found myself continuing to fumble over my words. I couldn't even ask the guy what his name was. I tried my best to brush everything off as just a random meeting with some crazy person, but the large man ended up telling the truth. He told me, "Those skeletal remains found in the next county, it turns out it was just the skull, but when the test results come back, it's Caitlin." My heart dropped. How did this guy know that? I didn't tell anyone about my encounter with this strange man until the test results indeed come back, confirming that the remains found were that of Caitlin. The people that I told about my encounter after this were in disbelief. Some of my younger cousins who spend too much time on conspiracy theory websites thought he was a member of the Men in Black. The feds were brought in to help with the investigation, but what would aliens have to do with it? We all asked around about the guy, and through what seemed like an endless series of "I know a guy who knows a guy" rumors, it felt like something out of a movie. Some people said he helped them escape abusive relationships. Some said he gave away generous donations to people in need. Others swore he could read minds and somehow tell the future. A few even said he was an exorcist. It was like he was some metahuman. I don't know for sure, but after the police told Caitlin's parents about her skull being found, we had a lot of questions to ask him. And then things started to get really weird. When we were kids, Caitlin and I used to pass notes to each other when we were feeling down to cheer each other up. So it was strange that a few days after Caitlin's remains were identified, I came home to find a note folded up in the way that Caitlin used to fold hers, just sitting on a table in my living room. I opened it and nearly cried as I read the words, "Help me. Find Dakota Franson." It was Caitlin's handwriting. I searched up the name online, and the first picture I saw was the man I had encountered a few weeks before at the river. A link to his website helped me find a way to contact him to set something up. We had to know what he knew about the case. Why would he even bother with helping someone he never met before? So I sent him an email, practically begging him to come back and talk to us. Caitlin's parents were skeptical, thinking it was some guy that was just trying to get his hands on the $5,000 reward that was posted. I could understand why they would feel like that, but I had to go with my gut and take the chance to meet him. It was just a little while later that I got a reply, and as it would turn out, he was already aware of the concerns. The email I got back read, "Thank you for reaching out to me. Yes, in a way, I have been investigating Caitlin's disappearance ever since the skull turned up. I want you to know that I have no interest in the money. If the family feels so compelled, tell them to pass the money on to any charity they so desire. Let's make some good come out of this unfortunate event. I'm not going to lie. Because of my methods, I cannot take this information to the authorities, even though I have close ties with a few of the investigators on the case who are already aware of the situation. If you are still wanting answers, I can help you all speak to Caitlin directly. It will all make sense soon." Nearly everyone I shared the email with was in disbelief. Could this guy be real? An appointment was set up a couple of days later for him to prove himself. I asked him if we needed to bring anything to help him, and he asked that the 4 people closest to Caitlin be in attendance, and that they bring something connected to her, either stuff of hers or photos, gifts she may have given us. He'd take care of everything else, he said. Frank, Caitlin's mother and father, and I all volunteered to go, each of us bringing small gifts that reminded us of her. It felt a little overwhelming even considering this, but all of us were eager to hear from Caitlin again. He arrived with supplies for what he called a modernized seance, which apparently called for some candles, a lighter with weird engravings on it, pieces of paper with strange symbols drawn on them, and a small handheld radio. Caitlin's mother asked how everything was going to work, to which Dakota explained that all of the personal items were to help focus everyone's attention on Caitlin's unique energy. I was confused by what that meant, since it honestly felt like most people who used those terms didn't actually know what they were talking about. So I asked Dakota if he could maybe clear some things up. "I understand your concern. I honestly thought the same thing when I first got started. But in reality, this type of thing isn't much different than using two-way radios. Every soul acts like a frequency, or channel, if you will. If you want to talk to someone on these radios, you want to make sure everyone is tuned into the right channel, right? The same basic idea applies to channeling ghosts or even talking to someone living through telepathy. Technically, all you need is the person's name and a rough idea of what they look like to pull it off. But having items that belonged to the person and the stuff you typically see in seances can help strengthen the connection. "So what's the radio for?" Frank finally asked. "So you can all hear her voice," Dakota answered. "And maybe Ruby as well." Everyone in the room except Dakota immediately broke down into tears. He tried his best to console everyone and waited until the room settled down before continuing. "If you are ready, we can begin the preparations," he announced. "Let's do it," we all said. Following Dakota's instructions, we set up a table in the middle of the room, each of us placing a candle in a star formation in front of us on top of the pieces of paper with the funny symbols. Dakota turned on the little radio and set it in the middle of the star, as it only played static. "I need you all to simply focus on seeing Caitlin appear in front of us," Dakota instructed. "Simply think of the happiest memories you have of her. Any little thing you remember will help. There is another phase to this process we will complete once we are done talking to her." "What are you going to do?" Caitlin's father asked. "I am going to recite a bit of a spell to bring her to us," Dakota answered. "You will know when she's here, when the room starts to get colder." Dakota began talking as he passed the lighter around each candle, pausing as each candle was lit. I couldn't make out the words he was saying until the end, when he said aloud, Come and speak to free yourself from earthly bounds. Moments passed and nothing happened until a woman's voice started to come through the radio saying,
"She's coming."
Suddenly, the room temperature dropped instantly about 10 to 15 degrees. The room filled with static, making all of us uneasy. All of our attentions focused on the radio as the breaks in the static made it sound like someone was trying to come through.
"Mom? Daddy? Frankie? Jay?"
The familiar voice cried out.
"I miss you guys."
There was no mistaking it. Caitlin was with us in that room once again. We all took turns asking her questions, going from what happened that night to asking about what the afterlife was like. She was only able to speak sentence fragments through the radio, but Dakota was able to fill in the rest. Between the two of them, they were able to tell us everything that happened. Despite what some people assume, the reason for the fight between Frank and Caitlin was because he was trying to warn her about Wayne, but she wouldn't listen. Later on, when she was with Wayne, they got into an argument that escalated into a drug-fueled fistfight, and Wayne hit her hard enough to knock her out. Caitlin said she wasn't sure what happened next, but the next thing she knew, she was by the river, watching pieces of her own body being swept away. She was trying to reach out to her family, but somehow the conditions around how she died and where her body was left made it difficult for her to do anything, even search out others in her condition. When her skull resurfaced, she was able to seek out Dakota and show him a vision of what she saw, and that was what led him to the river where he and I met. Everyone was too overwhelmed to ask anything else, but something Caitlin said caught all of our attentions.
"Where's Grandma?"
Caitlin, she already moved on. It was the only way she was able to help find you, Dakota answered.
"I want to see her."
Caitlin replied.
"And Ruby."
You'll get to see them both. Very soon. I can promise you that. Everyone focused on Dakota, wondering what he meant. Apparently, the seance Dakota had in mind had a second part that would help Caitlin cross over. Dakota had everyone say their goodbyes before saying, "I call upon Michael the Archangel, guider of souls to the forever life. We have in our presence a spirit who is in need of your aid to move on to her final resting place, so she may be healed of her wounds and reunited with those she misses most. Take her upon your divine wing, so all may be healed." The temperature in the room started to get warmer. Everyone was feeling this warm, welcoming energy just fill the room, helping us all feel at peace. The candles suddenly all went out in an instant.
"I see them."
Caitlin said through the radio.
"I see light."
"Go, Caitlin, please," Frank said. "You'll be better."
"Goodbye. I love you."
Soon the energy in the room returned to as it was on any normal day. Dakota confirmed that this was because she had moved on and was no longer bound to this earth, but could visit once we were all ready. Somehow that day gave us all the closure we were looking for. Still to this day, nearly 4 years after she vanished, the rest of Caitlin's body has never been recovered. Because of that fact alone, her case is still open. As for Wayne, he's still serving time for drugs, and he hasn't exactly been a model prisoner. His sentence was extended due to prison fights he started. Because of Dakota, we were all able to move on. Frank was even able to overcome his depression and find someone new. But I think it had more to do with the conversation he had with Dakota just after the seance. Frank had asked Dakota why he was trying to help us. And as it turned out, it was because he had gone through something similar. He told his story to everyone in the room, and it's something that I could never forget. Dakota said, "When I was 19 years old, I got engaged to this girl from D.C. She was absolutely beautiful, way out of my league, to where a part of me still questions why she ever said yes. When we met, She was getting out of an abusive relationship with this guy who used to beat her whenever he got high in order to try to save the baby she was about 2 months pregnant with. It was a bit of a long-distance relationship, but we managed to make it work. 4 months into the relationship, when she came to visit me for Valentine's Day, I proposed, probably getting myself into a deeper situation than I could handle, but honestly, I didn't care. I felt like she was the one, and we had started to come up with a plan to build our own family, then go into careers that would allow us to help others. In fact, she was wanting to go into the FBI, but somehow, when she got home, her ex found out about us. He got drunk and high off God knows what, broke into her place and killed her. She apparently put up a fight, but by the time the cops got there, it was too late. She and her baby girl were gone. The guy was later shot dead by police. To honor her memory and that of a few other forces in my life, I try to help people avoid that heartache. And before you ask, that woman who spoke through the radio just before Caitlin did was her. My fiancée managed to cross over, but she still occasionally comes around to help me out. When I found your channel and listened to other stories about Dakota, a few more dots connected. I guess it's safe to say at least one of the other forces he mentioned was the little girl he calls Olivia. I haven't spoken to him since that day, but I've heard rumors that he's still very much active, helping others. This has been another strange but true story sent to us by a viewer just like you. Let us know what you thought of this story in the comments below. If you have had a similar encounter or a story of the paranormal that you would like to share with us, send your story via email to strangebutTrueStories2@gmail.com. Subscribe if you haven't already. Sign up for notifications in the top right corner so you know when the next video drops to the channel. Thanks for watching this video. I'm Steve White. Until next time.